Anahita, we have talked about having a little fireside chat today because I wanted to do it myself. And we've had a long chat last time about how we can improve European governance, how we can improve working together of sustainability and corporate responsibility in terms of economic growth. We have talked about regulation agendas, but when I look at sustainability leaders today, and I'm meeting quite a few here and there, most of them have one thing in common, and that is that their motivation usually comes from crisis, their personal motivation. Personal crises, corporate crises, change in lifestyle. I am a former corporate executive. My kid is now 8 years old, and I need to do something good for the world because my mind changed. With you, it feels different. It doesn't feel like you've gone through something like that. It feels like it's value-driven. What is your value set behind your sustainability work?
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. I think some of the things that we do, they are so rooted in yourself that you basically have a struggle explaining it. It's just part of your DNA. It's the way you do it. It's the way you talk. It's the way you engage. It's the way you build bridges. And I would say that definitely some part of it is the way I grew up, the way my parents left their country, the way they taught me how to behave towards other people, but also towards nature. But I think, if you look at sustainability, it's such a big topic, and I think being humble around what do we actually know, what can we teach our peers, what can we learn from our peers, and how can we teach the next generation about what actually sustainability is. I think that for me personally, it has been a very long journey towards what can I give back to society, because given the circumstances, my family was lucky.
So funny enough, that's what I thought you would say, because I have a friend who has a similar backstory, and he gave me the exact same answer. Interestingly, when we speak to neuroscientists about the entire idea of sustainability, they always say that in their research, the main finding is that it's kind of counterproductive to human DNA. The way that we see the world is, I need to survive, and I need to protect myself, me, my family, my friends, and then everything else comes after that. So sustainability, doing something for the greater good, it's like the last thing you do, by nature, right? So is it true that especially these people that have been given the idea that the greater good is more important because they've also seen the bad very early, is coming with a certain responsibility to also give back to society, but also to drive change in the right direction?
I would be a little bit careful about how individuals react to bad or challenging times when they were younger, because we see both sides, right? We see people imitating things that were not so good. But I think there is definitely a cohort, I would call them, of people who say, what we have seen is something that should not be repeated. There comes lots of responsibility with that, and you start slowly. I think it's really important not to put too much burden on the individuals, but to ensure that everybody knows that once they have started, they can grow and they can become a voice, be it in sustainability, but be it in anything else. I think it's really community building that I would encourage the next generation to do, and honestly also some not next generation, because everybody can start at any age.
In that process of getting you there yourself, what was the most memorable experience that you've had as a professional, as an important voice in the community, or an important feedback that you got from the community that confirmed to yourself that you're on the right path?
I would say my biggest impact has always been in the intersections. So when you bring people from institutions, politicians, business and think tanks together, this is when the beautiful work happens. It's not when you're sitting just with one company advising them on their supply chain, being the lawyer of some of the biggest companies in the world. It is really when the dots are connected, and may just be the facilitator in that moment. You may be the person who is the host, but I think that's the biggest impact. And the other thing is much smaller, but I think equally important in the sustainability sphere, which I know it's kind of draining, and some people are kind of exhausted, is the little things, the letters that I receive, the text messages, the LinkedIn messages, all these things that really, I mean, for some people it's small things. For me, it means a lot because I can really see. I was in Dubai at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting last week for the Global Future Councils. I sit on the Good Governance Council, and I was with my cohort of young global leaders of the WEF at the Museum of the Future. And this woman comes up to me, she comes from India, and says, I love your work. And I'm sorry, did we meet? And she said, I know you from LinkedIn, and your work on sustainability is so amazing. And you see somebody coming from India, we are seeing each other in Dubai in this, museum. It just gives you hope that what you do is not just for yourself, but for so many other people. And it's particularly women who say, well, maybe I go that path too.
That's awesome. Congratulations to that. I think that is a really powerful experience. I don't think we had the time to do this last time, but I want to do it today. I want to really dumb this down for a second, because I feel like we're always going into these big conversations about what do we have to do in corporations and what about regulation. Maybe explain in your words the actual importance of a sustainability agenda to drive a society in the right direction. Because I always say no one wakes up in the morning and says, today I'm going to destroy society. Today I'm going to destroy the planet. Right? I think people want to do good, they just don't understand what the agenda looks like, the importance of their own role in it.
Starting with the part on regulation. I mean, we have an expert here in the first row who can talk about this extensively. There is good and bad regulation, for sure. I mean, I've seen so much regulation that has impacted in a more positive way, and something that we call paper tiger in Germany, where you basically produce just documents over documents, and you don't know, do you really impact any lives here or in any kind positively to nature? So I think I would start always that, zoom out and say, when we talk about regulation, it's not all bad. If you look at your constitutions, if you look at our German constitutions, I mean, wow, what a document, It has upheld our values for such a long period of time after war. So I would say acknowledging that regulation is not only bad, but there is good regulation. And secondly, I would say that we have gone a very long way. Those of you who have started with something like the UN Guiding Principles, the OECD guidelines, you will know that, we have started with soft law way back ago. So, and now we are in a transitioning phase, which, for example, in Germany, we have the German Supply Chain Act, really concrete law, where we are learning on the law, with the law, and with the, unfortunately, sometimes limited guidance that we have from the authorities, what it actually means. So I don't believe that without processes, you can actually have a real impact in the world. So as you say, if you just wake up and say, I want to be better, I want to be good, what does that actually mean? And who defines actually what is good and bad? And I think I would be very careful about, in any regard, alluding to anyone is bad or good. And I'm also, from my personality, I'd rather look at the positive examples, because there is also a book when we very briefly talk about the equality topic, which has seen a backlash and I think is embedded in the sustainability topic as well, written by Professor Iris Bennett from the Howard Kennedy School. And I had the privilege of learning from her in her class. And she said, the book is called What Works? And she said, we too often talk about the things that don't work or are challenging or the backlashes. Talk about the things that are being done well. Look at the history of sustainability. When you some of you are more my generation, some of you are even older than I am, if I may say so. Look at the path that we have come. 18 years ago, what was actually there? Honestly, everybody was freelancing around what they thought is sustainability. Like if you talk to companies in some parts of Germany, like the Schwäbisch Einstellung, right? Let's make sure that we don't spend too much money. That's sustainability. And in some regards, if you look at them now, really they have been sustainable in their own way. But there were no processes in place, there were no programs, there was little awareness of what that means. And I really think those of us who have been long in this game of impact, we are not too exhausted. We're exhausted, but we're not too exhausted about the backlash, because we have seen much bigger challenges in the beginning than we are seeing right now, and we will just work on, as you said, no noise, doing our work, convinced of what we are doing here is really important, and with little steps, we're going the right direction.
So you're saying motivation is nothing without method?
Absolutely. It's great to have good motivation. I think it's part of the what you need at the moment, particularly. But you need method, you need processes, you need allies. I always say you don't walk alone. You don't walk alone as an external counsel. I'm on several advisory boards. You never walk alone. If you walk alone, you're not successful. And you don't have much impact. Yes, you need method, you need processes.
So assuming I agree with that, and I think that's kind of a big message for all of you guys. Like the motivation is great, but we need the method with it, and we're going to come to that later. Now, you've also addressed that in your pre-talk. Like, what's this whole backlash about? Why do people that want to do good and start to develop a method and even try to make money with it here and there, what do they get? Why do they get such backlash for their ESG initiatives?
Well, I think we have to distinguish between those who have bad intentions. They don't, focus on the next and the next generations, but they want just something for themselves. And those who have been simply overwhelmed by the expectations put on them. That includes much regulation, a lot of regulation at the same time. If you look at the breadth of regulation that came in at the same time with high expectations from the EU taxonomy to CSRD, CSDDD, you name them all at once, of course that overwhelms companies. And the second part is, I think the way we use our words have frustrated some people. So we have lost some people who were actually on the agenda, on the side of doing more on the sustainability sphere by, in some ways, shaming them because they have not used the right words. And that's why I think it's so important to build bridges. Don't react to someone who has just used the wrong words or didn't use the words that you would normally, because you're a specialist or because you're so passionate about the topic. I think being just generous with each other would help to get at least those people who were like, oh my God, this is going too far for me. I cannot cope with this. I would say, yeah, let's try to win them for us instead of shaming them. Or I just tend to say to everyone, let's be generous with each other.
So isn't that a good motto also to treat the relationship between Europe and the GCC region? Because I feel like as a European, looking at the GCC for a long time, obviously the way the economy is shaped here due to the natural resource availability over a long time, which helped create the prosperity that exists here today, has led to a certain perception of the region's sustainability agenda or lack of such in the European population. Coming here, though, and working here and meeting the people, you see that as a completely different angle. You sit in all these rooms, you sit with these guys, with the decision makers. What is the actual sentiment?
I think it is too easy to say the sentiment in a certain region is as follows. I think it's multidimensional and very complex, especially this region. I mean, look at the different perspectives and the challenges that they are facing in this region. I would really highlight that some individuals have done really interesting work, and some of them have visions that go way beyond what we are currently seeing actually with some heads of states in Europe. And I'll give you an example. Last week at the GFC, so the annual meeting of the Global Future Councils of the World Economic Forum, the AI minister says, what is your audacious vision for your country? What is your audacious vision for the climate? I believe in 10 years we will be able to, turn this around. Do we have audacious visions? Do we actually have a vision? Or are we worried about expressing any vision and then putting this into work? So I would say in every region and in almost all rooms that I'm in, I can learn from someone else. I don't judge people too quickly. I try to not judge them at all. I've got my unconscious biases. I fight them all the time, and I've been very successful in just listening and taking home with me some of the lessons that I can learn. And I think that is what I would really recommend to do when you're in this region or when you're in our region or any other region in the world. Just take things that you think are valuable for your organization, for your company, for your country, and put them into action as much as you can. And there will be things that we need to name. There are things that we need to criticize. I do that behind closed doors. That's the way I do things. And if you think that by shaming you will be successful, we have seen in the last few years it's not been successful.
So the framework for what you're saying is then the regulation, right? We come to a point where people have good intentions, people develop methods, and then we need to somehow control that the whole thing that they're all doing together goes in the right direction. Now, you've written a book, and you've written a book on the, let's call it the tension between trust and regulation. So how much do we trust the people, the population, the society, the entrepreneurs, the corporations to do good in their interpretation of good? And how much do we want to control them in what they do? So assuming, I listen, I believe in the good practice, I develop the motivation to go in the right direction, and I develop the professional method and capital supply to do this. Why do I need to get regulated in my doing? And why do I need to get frustrated by it? I know it's a catchy question, but
So, first of all, I would say I'm not pro-regulating everything, just to set the record straight. But imagine your own personal life. How many things do you take for granted? You step on a train and you assume you'll be arriving safely. You sit in a car, you drive it, and you assume the airbag is working. You go to a restaurant and you assume that the food is fine and you will not have stomachache afterwards. This is all also, I want to highlight that, due to regulation. Would you step on a plane that is unregulated? I mean, I think, just change your perspectives before you just blame regulation for the challenges you are facing. And that's all I'm asking for when we say we just build everything on trust. If you sell your house and all that comes with it in Germany, which is quite complicated, you need to go to the notary, etc., etc. Do you just trust that the money just is transferred to you? And the same thing if you just sit quietly, zoom out, I would say some things need to be regulated, and to some degree we have done it right, and to some degree we have just created too much bureaucracy, and we need to unwind that unnecessary bureaucracy, but keep the processes that were, I see these companies and they have evolved and they're doing better, and I see the progress. I mean, it's not, are they perfect? No, but who is perfect in the first place? And if you look at some of the regulations that have come into place, we have all benefited from them. We are, secure in our transactions as much as we can. We are secure in traveling as much as we can. Of course, there are bad people in the world, and there's bad habits. But altogether, I think let's really keep an eye on bad versus good regulation, and make sure that we keep things in perspective.
You are specializing, if I paraphrase, you're specializing mainly also on the supply chain portion of it. The supply chain is not necessarily known for one of the sexiest parts of the business. I think we can agree on that. Having worked in
think it's sexy.
Yeah. I'm just speaking for the audience. However, my feeling is, if the audience understands better the paramount role of the supply chain and the importance of regulation within it, they will understand better how you can actually implement sustainability very well in a fair, regulated, but structured market that operates like a framework in which you give people a lot of freedom to be very good entrepreneurs.
I think what we have seen with supply chains, again, those of you who have been dealing with this topic for a longer period of time know this. I mean, when COVID hit, it was really surprising how few companies, and I'm talking, I advise the big ones, right? I mean, they have staff, at least more staff working on compliance than most other companies in the whole world. So how little companies were prepared for good supply chains in the sense that you can actually deliver the goods to your customers. And we have seen that also with the Panama Canal, with the Suez Canal. I mean, I can give you so many examples where companies were simply not prepared for the situation. That's a combination of lack of strategic foresight, but also, of course, margins. And, I mean, I have clients who argue with me around 2 cents for a product, and I'm just like, if you cannot change the supply chains because 2 cents, I mean, from a lawyer's perspective, it's difficult to navigate or advise you. But there are other clients who really have taken the crises that they have gone through to really properly work towards, okay, next time I don't know what crisis would happen, but at least I have much more awareness around my real supply chain. Although they have 10,000s of, we're talking about all the tiers, like not just tier 1, but to the end of the supply chain. So I think this awareness has helped them enormously to say, okay, in real time I know where is my gap, and that's where that gap I need to close. So I think, and parts of it, actually, the regulation has helped them to say, okay, so far I wasn't forced, but now I'm also forced to do it. So trace back my supply chain as much as I can, which makes, in some regards, again, I'm not naive. I know we need to caveat things. In some regards, makes your supply chain more resilient.
So that was exactly my point. So you're talking mainly about transparency. We come to a point where step 1, the regulation says you need to get more transparent. You need to tell us what you're actually doing, and then through the transparency process, you will learn what to do better. And then we're going to regulate you on that, because then everyone has the same fair chances. But the first step to get there is that we understand what everyone's doing.
Yeah, I mean, the transparency point is a very important point, because without the transparency, I mean, how can you adjust anything? Without the data, most clients just sit on the data and they don't use the data that they have. And this doesn't mean that I want to insinuate that it's not difficult to analyze the data. It is still difficult to analyze the data, but the transparency part is the key part for internal purposes to become simply better in analyzing the data and saying, okay, how can actually, irrespective of any regulation, how can I be more resilient
Right.
as a company?
Right, okay.